Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of the LRBAA Today series. My name is Dusty Lang. I am the LRBAA Program Manager at DHS S&T. And today we're going to be talking about the Detection Canine Program. But before we start talking about that, let me go over what the LRBAA is a little bit. So LRBAA stands for Long Range Broad Agency Announcement. So those of you that are familiar with broad agency announcements, it is a broad agency announcement. It's called long range because the topics are very high level and they're out there for an extended period of time. So the BAA itself is a 5-year BAA, and we have topics that we have out there that may be on there for 5 years, but we also can pull some down and pull some back up. So because these are high-level topics, we have a 3-step process to be able to determine if we are going to proceed with an effort, because we want to keep that first initial phase fairly light load to be able to determine if there is interest. So the first step is the industry engagement, and this is a 3-page white paper and a quad chart. If there's interest based on this submission, then you'll be recommended to go forward to the virtual pitch, which is the second step. In the second step, you'll be able to present a 12-slide PowerPoint, and you'll have 20 minutes to discuss, and then there will be a 15-minute question and answer period. So if you're recommended from there to go forward, the third step is the written proposal. So that's when you do the full 25-page submission that is the regular proposal that would be the basis of the contract. Now, because these are high level, the other thing that we want to do is make sure that we're providing as best as we can the information that helps you and us use our resources as best. So we're going to be doing the LRBAA Today series in a way to let you know what the DHS mission space is, and then also give you more information about the programs where we are today. So as I said, today we're talking about the Detection Canine Program, and I'd like to thank and welcome Don Roberts. So Don, welcome and thank you. If you could, yes, if you could introduce yourself, indicate, your title and just kind of say what you do at S&T.
Sure. So my name is Don Roberts. I'm the program manager for the Detection Canine Program at Department of Homeland Security Science and Technology Directorate, which is the research and development arm of the Department of Homeland Security.
Great, thank you. So there's a broad mission for Detection Canine at DHS. It's not just the cute fuzzy folks you see at TSA that we're not allowed to pet. Can you talk about what that overall mission is for DHS?
Sure. Our program serves the whole of the Department of Homeland Security component, the operational components such as TSA, Secret Service, Federal Protective Service, all the end users, Customs and Border Protection, as well as, by extension, the Homeland Security enterprise that encompasses the state and local law enforcement that also utilize detection canine teams of all disciplines. So we support the whole of the department end users, and these end users are charged with protecting the homeland and utilizing detection canines for narcotics detection, explosives detection, human detection, urban search and rescue, all types and forms of the canine discipline. And that's what we support. And that's what these end user mission areas are wide and diverse. And that's what we have to be able to have a program that is broad in scope to support them.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, when you talk about S&T, we're the research and development arm of DHS. So when we do our piece, it's just a subsection to be able to support them. So can you talk about what we do in S&T to be able to support those missions? And then I understand we have an increased scope recently. So if you could talk about that increase in scope as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, historically, we've been supporting the broader mission, and really the mission space is the provide tools, techniques, and knowledge to better understand, train, and utilize the detection canine teams. I mean, it's a pretty broad base. Our basic impact area is to improve the operational proficiency, as well as look to help these guys maintain their canines in a more effective and efficient way, especially the local law enforcement guys. A lot of these guys are doing 2 and 3 jobs. They want to try and minimize the training impact. Regular maintenance training is very important to keep these teams at a high level of proficiency. And what we want to be able to do is research providing them, tools to make their training more effective, as well as trying to shorten the amount of time. We're investigating generalization studies to see if these end users have to train on 20 different types of odors, or if there's a chemical class that's very similar, could they only train on one? So that's the kind of research we do. We try and enable these end users to, bottom line, improve their operational proficiency and help them train more effectively and efficiently. And at the end of the day, the research elements that we bring out have to fit within that. We really want to impact the department, and by extension, the Homeland Security enterprise with the state and local law enforcement teams, the impact to improve their proficiency in operations.
Okay, great.
And yeah, you mentioned the scope increase. I didn't touch on that very quick, but in the past few years, our scope has increased from to look more at the basic platform, the structure and function of the basic detection platform, which is a biological entity, and looking at how to improve that particular platform by better breeding, better understanding of the olfaction that's going on, the better understanding of the link of the cognition, to go into training and understanding the behavior of these dogs, and really what allows these guys to pick better dogs, how we could potentially selectively breed better dogs and better detection dogs to make them healthier, to extend their work life. So really, it's been the role that we're playing is more looking backwards to understanding the basic platform. There's an exponential increase in explosive detection dogs after 9/11. And the knowledge base just hasn't kept up with the demand. And that's really where Homeland Security, and especially S&T, has been able to fill a vital role, is giving these end users a better understanding of how they should be training, what they should be training on, and giving them a better feel for just how their training is relating to their operations. They have a particular concept of operations. They have an area to protect. They have contraband to stop. Does their training reflect what they need to do in operations? And that's kind of what we bring to the table. That's more about our increased scope and broader take at all of this.
That's quite a lot. So sounds like we're bringing a lot to the table, which is good. So I know you kind of touched on at least one of these, but the key research challenges that we're facing. So we have this broad space that is our area of support, but then as we go along, we're always wanting to make sure we're prioritizing and providing those elements that are of key importance. So can you talk about the key research areas, capabilities?
Sure. I mean, and one of the things that the slide was up there, about program capabilities, and that's what we kind of frame that out as providing that for the end users, giving a federal focal point of sharing for the R&D, providing an avenue for them to address problems such as rapid response to emerging threats, those kind of things, providing a subject matter expertise in chemistry of odor, canine training, all of that focused on an R&D effort that addresses the the end user's need. But yeah, so a lot of our research challenges go into training methods and tools and developmental strategies. we already touched on trying to have them train more effectively and efficiently. Any tools or research concepts that uncover better ways to maintain, the working dogs, the department working dogs, as well as state and local law enforcement. One key thing, a second bullet is really, and I mentioned on being able to understand how the training matches up with the operational expectations, is really looking at ways to measure the operational performance. We've been kind of the pioneers in really getting regular operational testing via our state and local READY events, the regional explosive detection dog initiatives, where we go out and put real world problems out for these guys, real world scenarios that they have to show up cold, and they show up, they have to clear something, a stadium, a school, and we replicate that to ensure that they, to understand where their maintenance training is applying to improve their operational proficiency, as well as understanding where their gaps are, where their needs. We're using that READY initiative with state and locals to really understand what their needs based are, where they're doing things right, where they need particular, S&T to develop something or uncover a knowledge base to help them out. That's been a very successful initiative for us. A lot of good feedback, informs our research portfolio and frames out some of our gap areas that we need to fill. It also understands regionally what guys are doing differently across the country. If the LAPD guys are doing something that we want to be able to share with, that the Florida PD guys are not necessarily, we want to be able to be a focal point for that, sharing and uncovering those things that they're doing right out there, and not just focusing on the particular gaps. But novel ways to assess operational performance without hugely impacting their day-to-day operations. That's very difficult, because one of the key things that we bring into the S&T approach to canine measurement is statistically significant, scientifically rigorous processes. And that isn't always talked about in the canine world. It's very difficult to get statistically significant numbers for the canines working, because we can't, like the electronic technology, we can't run them 1,000 data points over a weekend in a laboratory. The handlers get tired, the dogs get tired necessarily. Dogs have a bad day, we don't necessarily know. They can't tell us they've got a cold, they can't feel, so we have to get data over time, and that is, it's time consuming. But so better ways at looking at how to measure operational performance, that's a key piece to what we do. Validating best practices. There's a lot of things out there that dog guys have been doing because they know how to do it, and they're right. They know how to do it, but we want to be able to validate that and replicate that novices can do. Not that it takes a 30-year dog guy to be able to do that. We want to get inside their head. We want to validate best practices and guidelines to give these guys, the best pathways of setting best practices and based on some science that they could potentially take, that will back them up in court, or, to give them the best practices is going to be more successful in their operation, especially the guys that are, some of the high risk targets that we want to make sure that we're, providing the best detection tool out there. Maximizing the ability of the odor detection kind of goes in the same way. I talked about the breeding and the behavioral studies. What behavioral characteristics can we identify in puppies that, fear, guidance, what can we identify early on that, will lead these guys to make better decisions about choosing what kind of dogs they're going to either purchase or put through testing, saves them time, also provides a better tool on the backside, and potentially a longer working life, but a better performing detection tool that we have in our arsenal. So a lot of that goes to maximizing the abilities and some of the things that we have there. We talked about better understanding the structure and function, how to better understand, what's going on in the cognition, so we can potentially modify some of our training to make it stick earlier, or to minimize the time it takes for the dogs to get up to speed and where they need to go, whatever the performance modality or whatever the detection modality is. So that's kind of a lot of what we're looking for, but that's a little more insight into some of the challenges that we have.
Great. That's really good information. I couldn't help but think at the beginning, you mentioned having those test events where they're coming in cold, and I'm thinking, well, the dog, it's always cold. He never knows what's going to happen. So it's, they're just putting the people where the dogs always come in, right?
Yeah,
so
well, it is funny. It's the dogs know they're going to work. They when the handler's getting them out of the car, these working dogs, it's impressive to see. They put their game face on, just like they know when they're going home to hang out, and they know when it's time to work. It's an interesting transition to watch. It's, but that's the dogs we want. We want the dogs, that are showing up with their game face on, that can make that switch. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is better understand, how to assess those qualities a little bit earlier in their.
And I would imagine not only the game face, but also, as you talked about, also knowing when to then, okay, this is not game face time. So I'm sure that's all part of that behavioral stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's an important piece of these handlers working with and knowing their partners, right? Knowing, because they'll know the connection between the canine and the human is very strong. Domestic canines and historically, that's why, dogs are our man's best friend. There's a connection with humans, and the handlers knowing their particular partner, they can tell when they're having an off day, and that's important too, because we don't want just we don't want to have to do a temperature check on them every day and know whether they're ready to go to work. It'd be nice, but having that canine handler team has many benefits, and we're trying to understand how to make that stronger, how the handler can better recognize, what's going on cognitively, what they're understanding olfactory, to when they know they're detecting, to be able to improve the training, as well as improve the bond and the working performance overall.
Okay, thank you so much. So one of the things that I really didn't touch on at the beginning of this is the LRBAA is open very broadly across the different industries, so across industry. So we can take proposals from small business, large business, foreign-owned companies, FFRDCs. Do you want to talk a little bit about how all of those different parts of industry may be able to participate in the LRBAA for Detection Canine?
Sure. Every place from, academia, industry, private sector, laboratories. Our grounding is the working dogs. Our grounding is the department working dogs. We're not interested in, pet products or things like that. It's not just to improve the overall dog, and it is really to improve these Olympic athletes, these canine partners, and the overall training to really protect the homeland security. That's where our fit is. So really, it is a broad brush, from very small companies. We've done the Silicon Valley initiative. We've done long range BAA with very small companies. A few hundred K, over a year, to support larger contracts that have multifaceted expertise to be able to apply to a larger set of our requirements, a few million to a few hundred K. I mean, it really does run the gamut. The focusing point is it doing something impactful? Is it enabling something that we can transition eventually, either a knowledge product, tool, technique, widget, whatever, to our operational component customers and state and local law enforcement that make their jobs easier?
That's great, and I know I get the funding level question is one I get often in conversations with industry. So it also touches great there, and I think it leads well into my next question, which is, okay, you talked about these different funding levels. So I imagine key is making sure you get the right approach and information into your submission to be able for you to understand why you want to say yes and go to recommending to the next step. So can you talk about what you see in the submissions that for detection canine that have key elements that are needed or are missing key elements that are commonly not included?
Yeah, I mean, it really is touching on how they are, transitioning, how the results will be able to be transitioned in the form of a knowledge product. What can we uncover about cognition that can make an impact into the operational ConOps? Where can we help these guys improve? And that's really the grounding element is, have the offers thought about the downstream impact and how can they help us, articulate that up front. That's where we want to be grounded. We really start from what operational gap, what training gap, where are we hitting that impacts our end users, our state and local guys, our component end users, where are we hitting those marks, and then backing up the research and how we expand the knowledge base to meet that, varied types of tasking. But yeah, that is really what we want to see. That's what we want to look for. Help us understand the relevance, help us understand the impact right up front, and then then tell us why we think that, then detail what the plan is. That's been helpful for us in evaluating these proposals.
Yeah, and then also, yeah, so making sure you go through from the first stage and become bigger and bigger each time. I know you also did one of the TIES events back in December. So I always think it's important for folks to be able to get to an authoritative source of information for us, because it's easy to get lost in Google and other types of searches. So I think that's a good place for some folks to also look for some information. And I know we put the link onto a slide that we're going to show here in a little bit. Did you want to talk about any of the key elements that they could find in that TIES event?
Yeah, the TIES event, was an excellent event. I mean, I think that it not only did they hear from the program office and our perspective on the research challenges and what we were looking for, but they also heard from some of our main component customers as well as our state and local end users about what their challenges were, and some things that we did to help their mission, things that we're doing continually to assist them. So it was really, that's where I think the event excelled, is not only hearing from us in S&T, but bringing our end user customers there, hearing from them, hearing a bit from our leadership, and Jay Martin, and framing out how he looks at, the bigger picture. But I think also on the S&T website, our program has a number of snapshots and videos, a few program videos that again are spoken from our end user customer set that gives them a feel for some of their challenges, especially our Ready event video. That one is, fortunately, is very little of me talking and more of the operational guys talking, given their perspective on the impact and what they face. And that's a great place to start. I think TIES is up with the video presentations. Skip mine and look at our operators. That'd be that'd be my advice. But yeah, that's some of the at the S&T website. There's more material. So
I think that's a really great thing, especially, that you're noting, and that was included, like you said, that the operational folks are in there, because I've over the years of working with R&D, You know, there's this little bit of gap sometimes in what would be really, really neat to explore and research, and then how it really is able to be transitioned operationally. You know, sometimes things that seem great on paper just are not able to be executed. So I think, as you were talking about before, that and the submission, this is a great way for them to be able to think all the way through to that end transition and make sure that that's where their goal is and they're keeping their eye on the goal.
Yeah, and the long range BA office has made it much easier on us in the program side, because as well as the industry side, because as you mentioned earlier, you know, we could do a virtual pitch, you know, we can do an industry engagement where we can have a dialogue, and help these folks, you know, further refine that. You know, we want them to do their homework. We don't want just, you know, stuff thrown over the fence. We want them to do their homework first, of course, but you know, the process is much more flexible than it used to be, and you know, and it allows, it benefits us in the program office as well as, you know, the offers and the vendor community.
I always couple of key things is I always, in these LRBAA Today episodes, I always say we're not looking for more proposals or submissions necessarily. You know, we'll take more, but we'll want good ones. We want ones that are, and so it's incumbent upon us to provide the information to make that connection. So that's the goal of this. So Don's not asking for everybody watching necessarily, you must send one in, but certainly if there's you know, some interest and some connections, that's great. The other thing is I always like to touch on in the virtual pitch process is that just be aware we cannot, and I know Don doesn't do this, but just for the expectation for the viewers, we cannot provide guidance or direction to what you're submitting. But in those virtual pitches, there's 15 minutes of question and answer. So pay attention to the questions that are being asked, because that is a way for you to be able to understand from what you presented. Maybe you just didn't articulate it, but also sometimes it may be something that you need to think about in terms of the full approach. And if you do recommend to go to full proposal, to make sure you thought of how you're going to address that as well, so that we get to a better place overall. So thank you very much, Don. That was a lot of great information. I think, so right now what I want to do is we're going to be pulling up a slide that's going to tell folks how to get to the LRBAA topics so they can make sure they have the ability to read through those topics, which also have information in them. And while I'm going over this, if you have questions that we're going to go into a question and answer period after this. So throw up some questions onto the Q&A section, and we'll get to the questions right after this. So how to apply. So you're going to go to the DHS BAA portal. The URL is up there. You're going to click on funding opportunities, and then you're going to search under keywords and make sure you're under the research topic or the research areas, not the topic areas. The research areas, the LRBAA, the topic areas is targeted BAAs, and there's not always ones up there, and there definitely aren't any detection canine ones up there right now. But then under the keywords, you want to check the canine. And then the 3 topics listed there are the ones that are detection canine. So we may not have exactly those 3, but we will be doing some detection canine topics, you know, over the life of the LRBAA, given the increased scope that we've already been talking about. And then there's the 3-step process. If you have questions about the process, then certainly you can email the lrbaa.admin@hq.dhs.gov. And we can help with that process part. If you're wondering, how do I get a hold of Don to see if he's interested in my idea, you go to the DHS BAA portal and you submit an industry engagement. So it's the light lift way to get information to Don and be able to get a response back if there's interest. Also on the bottom right, I want to draw your attention, as we discussed, the TIES event. So we created a bit.ly so that you guys can get there quickly. So make sure you're copying that down, and there's recordings from the TIES event that you can look at. And I recommend you watch Don's as well as the others in there. So thank you. Ready for questions from the audience?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So one that is sort of unavoidable is, and I think a really interesting one is that is there research being done related to COVID-19 and detection canine activities in that area?
Yeah, there's a lot of countries and there's some efforts going on in the U.S. You know, we in the something just came out. I think they're using them in Finland's airport. You know, but there's some operational trials going on. But you know, in S&T we have instituted a rigorous requirements development process that we have to follow, that our things our efforts have to meet. And you know, one of our components, you know, the Counter Weapons Mass Destruction Directorate, really, and we had a number of proposals back in March, April timeframe coming in. There was a DHS Tiger team established to see how S&T could impact and add to the dialogue. And as you might expect, we had, you know, a number of proposals come in for using canines to detect, and really they all had a very consistent theme, is, you know, model it off of the ongoing medical detection, change detection in what humans may be giving off for, say, bladder cancer or other things like that. So that really wasn't for this, the gap in identifying folks with symptoms, excuse me, can be done. Like I mentioned, you know, it's the key gap was asymptomatic identification, and really that method of using the dogs first to investigate the detection didn't provide our end user component customers with enough scientific certainty that we were isolating what we needed to detect. So we took a laboratory first, unique approach that we're looking at, trying to identify a potential biological VOC signature that's being given off by asymptomatic individuals. And this is not just a canine detection only type of pursuit. This would inform chemical nanosensors, other different drive other innovations if we can determine biomarkers of asymptomatic individuals that we could potentially use canines for, or other sensor modalities that we could use. And that was what was the requirement back from our components, that why they liked this particular proposal and why we went forth with more of you know, kind of an approach that touched on a broader base of detection other than canines. It could include canines, but you know, it will set the stage for using other modalities. We also investigated a bit of you know, how to put together a canine decontamination protocol for these working dogs working in and around the public that could be exposed, and then taking something home to their families. And you know, we built upon current protocols, but those protocols are kind of one-off. You know, you're exposed on the rubble pile, or a DOD dog exposed to chem. Those kind of things aren't relevant for a day-to-day decontamination and neutralization of the potential virus on the animal, or their leash, or their collars, or whatever. So we investigated an everyday protocol that they can use that's not harmful to the dog or the handlers. So that's where we have focused more on that lane versus you know, we're watching what the other countries, we've had conversations with them about what they're doing, and but we invested in a different approach that was validated by what our customer set wanted.
Great. So I mean, you touched a little bit on the next question I'm going to ask, but the question is asking about the role of canine-mounted sensors like camera, chemical, and navigation. How do you see that playing in the future?
Sure. Yeah, we did an effort like this. It was a SBIR. It was a small business initiative that went to a phase 2, and really it was born out of a requirement we had from our state and local guys who really wanted stabilized video. if you look at a lot of the cameras that are mounted on animals or even humans walking around, body cams, you know, whatever, it's a little discerning if you're looking at it for a while. So if a handler is trying to track that dog downrange, that he's tracking a potential, you know, felony flea suspect, you know, it's very difficult to watch. And so we investigated, you know, potential stabilized video as well as location for GPS denied areas. And that was something that we saw was a good, you know, investment in a small business that went to a certain stage, but you know, it did show the challenges that there are. So we haven't had a lot of mounted sensor requirements. We do have an ongoing effort that CBP is interested in mounting health monitors on their dogs working in the high heat, working in the desert. They want to, when they're downrange, they want to know if they're in heat distress or something like that. So we've got a very promising effort that's looking at canine mounted physiological monitoring of their conditions. The handlers can usually do it relatively quickly, you know, in the field. But when they're working downrange, in certain conditions, it'd be nice to have something wearable. But it really hasn't been, you know, a requirements driver. Years ago, there was some thought about putting chem sensors on, but you know, we're not going to use our very highly trained working dogs as canaries in coal mines. You know, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so yes, I would think so, and there might be some other issues there, but and kind of leads to my next one, which is what is the appropriate duration of time for performance before a break? You know, do they get the same? You got to get 15 minutes every 4 hours if you're working full time, that kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, it varies. You know, it's kind of like. You know, our department dogs outside of CBP that works in pretty rough condition, most of our other larger deployed dogs work, you know, in relatively benign, you know, air conditioned areas. So heat stress, like the DoD dogs, fatigue impacting detection is very real with them, and DoD has done some work looking at fatigue versus you know, detection performance. But our dogs, you know, and the adage is, you know, how long do you want them to work for? Because, you know, if I'm gonna run a marathon, I need to train for the marathon. If I'm a sprinter, you know, I need to train to run sprints. So you know, the question comes back to these end users is, what's the duration? Well, what's the duration you need it to be? Because if you're only going to be doing your training working them 10 to 15 minutes, then they're going to work 10 to 15 minutes. But if you want to push them to work an hour, you know, you got to push them a little harder. Just like the long distance marathon, these guys they're athletes too. So that's kind of, the question goes back to what's the need and what can we do with that. But the expanded scope of our program, we can start to look and address those requirements for our end users if we get any, looking at physiological elements of that.
So that answer brought in so many more elements of what you talked about previously in this episode than I had expected. So it's a lot of those, you know, what is the operational, you know, how are they executing effectively over time and all those other things. So it brings back many of those questions and key challenges that you spoke about earlier. So that's very interesting. I do really enjoy the Olympic, the reference to them being Olympians. I think that's a good way to try to describe the fact that we're talking about working dogs and really performing some really incredible missions versus just, you know, dogs that know when the mailman's here. So great. So we are over time a little bit. I know you have a lot going on today, and I really appreciate the time you've been able to spend with us. Before we close out, do you have any last thoughts on anything that you'd like to touch on that we didn't cover?
No, like I said, I think there's you know, there's an avenue for us to reach out. We can, you know, through you guys, and then you know, we have avenues for us. But no, it's you know, we appreciate the opportunity to talk to the vendor community. We bottom line is we want more of the smart folks, much smarter than us, thinking about or knowing our challenges, to be able to think on those things and provide us solutions that help our end users. I mean, these guys are busy with their jobs. We need to be taking on how to help them, and that's the role of S&T. And being able to work with these guys, understand their requirements, and then be able to pass those on to the community at large to help bring good ideas from everywhere is really what we're trying to do, and that's what forums like this provide. So appreciate the time to talk to everybody.
Absolutely, thank you. So a couple of process questions that came, I'm going to address before I close out. So we are recording this session, so we will be posting that onto the S&T YouTube channel, the S&T Directorate YouTube channel. As a matter of fact, we just recently got the video for our first episode on threat detection posted a week or so ago, and then pretty soon we'll be getting the second episode on CUAS up. So we will be sending out, it'll be posted on social media, and also we'll be sending out an email to the listserv. So you can get on that listserv by going to the LRBAA.admin, to the URL at the top, and at the bottom of that website, you can join the listserv. I recommend you do that because this was the third episode. We are still working on the upcoming episodes and getting all of the subject matters and all of those things sorted out. So stay tuned for additional future episodes of the LRBAA Today. And the other question was related to submitting to all three topics. So definitely do not submit the same proposal to all three topics. In fact, don't submit the same topic to any more than one topic across the LRBAA. You need to, if you see an application, somewhere where you can apply, make sure you're submitting it to the one for which you can target that proposal. If you think it may be used in two different areas, then certainly update your proposal so that it speaks to what those are individually, so that they're not the same proposals going in. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I look forward to our next episode, and thank you to Don again for his time here today, and have a great afternoon, and everybody stay safe.